very interesting question. Because Father Juan de Mariana thought that, well, the first thing he asked himself and his readers, of course, was who is the owner of the property of what people have acquired and what people have produced. And after discussing different options, he came to the conclusion that, well, the owners, those people that create something new, that produce something new, they appropriate this by creating it or by exchanging it, and they are the owners. Nobody else can be the owners. Even the king cannot be the owner of that. The king might raise taxes under certain circumstances, but only under circumstances so not to be a theft. If the king, in order to raise taxes, does not fulfill certain requirements, this will have to be considered a theft because the owner is the other person. Okay. So Father Juan de Mariana said that this requirement was they need the consent. The king needs the consent, or the government needs the consent of the people. What does it mean to have the consent of the people? Well, in that time, in the times of Juan de Mariana, this meant that the king would need the consent of the, let's say, different little autonomies that Spain had, which basically means that you would need the agreement of every little community in order to raise a tax. And if you don't have the agreement of every little community, the king didn't have the right to raise taxes. If the king would raise taxes without the consent of the people, Juan de Mariana said this is a theft. And if the king does something like that, he's not anymore a king, he's a tyrant. Okay. And the people have the right to get rid of tyrants. First of all, people would have to tell the king, look, you are becoming a tyrant, you should not do this, you don't have the right to do this. And if the king wouldn't pay attention to this, the people would even have the right to get rid of the king by killing not the king, the tyrant in this case. Okay. So this is the theory of tyrannicide that Juan de Mariana defended, like many other authors. Juan de Mariana applied this to inflation. Juan de Mariana was one of the very first authors that said that inflation was a sort of tax. That inflation, by its nature, is a hidden tax, and usually it's not consent by the people. So it's the way that since the kings know that it's difficult to get the consent of the people for many of the things that they wish to raise taxes, that the king would wish to raise taxes, they try to do it through a hidden way, through inflation. Okay. And Juan de Mariana applied the same reasoning to inflation. They say inflation not only distorts commerce, the trade, but also it's a sort of theft, and the king doesn't have the right to do something like that. So how can we apply this to present day? Well, this is a very interesting question. First, because if you look at public deficits and level of taxation, we are very far from the ideal situation of Father Juan de Mariana, because we didn't follow his advice. Governments do not really ask the communities, not the people, but don't ask the little communities whether they want to raise taxes or not, whether they agree for this or that. And governments also take property away through inflation. So what could we learn? Well, I think we could learn that we have to make it very strict, as Juan de Mariana wanted. We will need very strict conditions in order to allow our modern kings, our government, to take some property away from us. Only when we agree, when we consent to do something like this, we should agree. So only in very important cases, only when the matter is very important, probably people would give their consent, and the king will have, the government would have the right to raise taxes. Well, I think if the modern Catholic Church reads the authors of the School of Salamanca, they would find themselves quite far away from that position. Maybe not from the philosophical some of the philosophical presuppositions, but the argumentation built on that philosophical presupposition, I think they are quite far away. The School of Salamanca was a group of authors that defended private property, that after 100 years of discussion about the just price, they came to the conclusion that the only possible just price was the free price in the race in the market.
Okay.
They discussed about competition. They came to the conclusion that competition is rivalry, that only in a market where everybody is free to offer something and to compete with each other, you have a real competition, and so I think the position was the position of the School of Salamanca was a very, very clear position in defense of individual liberty.
Okay.
And basically in defense of free markets as a way to do justice and to improve the well-being of people. And I don't think that nowadays Catholic Church, generally speaking, would agree,
share
this view, unfortunately. Oh yes, definitely. The School of Salamanca was a school, a very, very important school in the 16th and 17th century. When you read John Locke, you find many of the ideas of the School of Salamanca. This could have been a coincidence, of course. When you read Adam Smith, you also find you find some ideas that are different from the School of Salamanca, but you also find ideas that are very related to the thought of the School of Salamanca. And the lections of jurisprudence of Adam Smith, especially, you find many of the ideas that Juan de Mariana, Suarez, Vitoria developed. And are they related or not? This has been a big issue for many years. I think it's quite clear that there is a connection between these ideas. The ideas of the School of Salamanca didn't stay only in Salamanca or in Spain. They went to France, to Italy, to continental Europe. In fact, one of the latest books in the School of Salamanca was Lessius' book, Juria Juris. And in that book, this was a book with almost 40 editions, and it was read by many intellectuals, many writers in Europe at that time. One of the persons that read all these books, especially Lessius, was Hugo Grotius. These ideas came to Pufendorf in the German world, and from Pufendorf, we all know it, they went to Hutchinson and other authors that later influenced, or a few years later influenced the Scottish Enlightenment. So I think there is a clear connection. The ideas of the School of Salamanca went up to the Anglo-Saxon world, and in fact there are a couple of very interesting research, one of them by León Gómez Rivas, tracing even paragraphs from the authors of the School of Salamanca and seeing how they were modified a little bit, but basically taking from author to author, and they went to the Scottish Enlightenment. So I think the Scottish Enlightenment, in a way, is a branch or an elaboration, an evolution, an Anglo-Saxon evolution of the ideas of the School of Salamanca. In the case of John Locke, for example, the relationship of there's similarities between some of his ideas and Juan de Mariana's ideas that it took me some years ago to Oxford to see his personal library, and of course I found Juan de Mariana's book in his personal library. So it's not a coincidence that he was speaking about these very same ideas. It's about property and taxation and inflation. He read Juan de Mariana. I'm not saying that he would not have spoken about these ideas, but he already read those authors, and so in the base of his elaborations, of his arguments, were the ideas of the School of Salamanca. Well, it's an interesting connection because if you want to have if you read what Mises said, for example, in the setting of the Austrian school, he would say that the setting of the Austrian school, or the pre-Austrian school, or the original ideas of the Austrian school, the basic components are to be found in the Scottish Enlightenment. However, if you look at what von Bauer, for example, said, he said that the original ideas of the Austrian school are to be found in continental Europe, especially in Germany. So it's if you read the great Austrians, it's difficult to know exactly where the ideas come from. I think there is a clear relationship between the Austrian school and the Scottish Enlightenment and the School of Salamanca. In order to summarize it, I would say that the ideas of the School of Salamanca are probably the ideas of the continental liberalism.
Okay.
The origin of the continental liberalism that went to France, that created great schools in Italy and France. These ideas also, as we spoke before, also went to the Anglo-Saxon world. But there in the Anglo-Saxon world, they were somehow modified. For example, in the theory of value. Having a theory of value that was more objective, less subjective, like the theory of value of the School of Salamanca was. So in the continental Europe, they stay closer to what the original ideas of the School of Salamanca were. This idea went generation after generation through different authors like Turgot, like Condillac, like Galliani, of course, Bastiat, and many other authors. They reach a school finally in Germany that was a school that defended the Scottish Enlightenment. So we have like two parallel liberal schools.
Okay.
One is the continental line, I would say, and then you have the Anglo-Saxon line. That it has also the origins in the School of Salamanca, probably, but with some modifications, with some variations, that make the public policy conclusion a little bit more interventionist, I would say, in the Anglo-Saxon world. In the continental line ended up in a school called the Gebrauchwertschule in Germany, and this school that follow Adam Smith in many ways, for example, against mercantilism, but criticize Adam Smith in terms of theory of value, in terms of costs, in terms of the relationship between cost and prices. This is a school that follows this continental line I was talking about. And this is the school that which Menger was a member of, and that is the school that gives sort of birth to the Austrian School of Economics. So if you now look back or rewind, you see that the Austrian school comes from a school in Germany that is following Adam Smith and the Scottish Enlightenment in some ways, but it's a reaction against the Scottish or the ideas of Adam Smith and Ricardo in other ways, in the things that they have a significant difference with the continental line of thought. These ideas from these authors, like Rocher, Herman, and others, comes also from the French school, from Bastiat, from say Molinari, and many other authors. And if you continue going back, the origin of these ideas were the ideas of Turgot, Say, Galliani, Condillac. And if you continue going back, you end up in the School of Salamanca. So I think you have this continuous line in continental Europe, you have this variation in the Anglo-Saxon world that share many of the ideas and many of the elaborations and developments of the Scottish Enlightenment and later authors also have influence in the Austrian school, but it's probably not the direct line through that ends up in the Austrian School of Economics.